So for a while, I've had a video idea in my back pocket of counting down my favorite closed, removed, or defunct coasters, whatever you want to call them. But I really haven't ridden a lot of them. But yeah, that definitely changed in 2024. So yeah, the 2024 season was not the best for the amusement industry for numerous amounts of reasons, but there were a lot of ride removals this past year. But the cool thing is, I guess this video is coming out of it now. So yeah, with that being said, today's video is going to be counting down my top 20 defunct coasters. But before I get into that, let's look at some honorable mentions. So these two are rides that still exist, however they have significantly changed, so you cannot get nearly the same experience on them. The first one is going to be Batman Backwards, or NAMTAB, at Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey. Batman itself still exists as a ride, however back in 2015, the ride ran with a backwards train. I don't know if anybody remembers, but the Six Flags chain bought these backwards B&M invert chassis, and they sent them around the chain to all their back clones. And I had the pleasure of riding it a bunch of times, and honestly, it was really good. Super intense, and going backwards was super unique, and it's really a shame because I'm pretty sure the chain still owns these parts for the trains, but they just haven't used them since I think 2017, maybe a little earlier than that. But hopefully they can bring him back one day, or just permanently put him at another park, because Batman Backwards was just super awesome in my opinion. Next up is Lightning Rod in Dollywood in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Or I should probably say the old Lightning Rod. I'm sure you're probably aware of how much this ride has changed, but if not, this is what happened. When the ride first opened, it was manufactured by Rocky Mountain Construction, or RMC, and it was a fully wood coaster using their topper track. Topper track was kind of like a more capable, stronger form of wooden coaster track, and it was the world's first launched wooden coaster too, and it was the only launched wooden coaster ever. However, the ride has been pretty unreliable because of the combination of the wood and the launch. LSMs, which is what the launch used to push the train up the hill, need to be dead accurate, and unfortunately on a wood structure and wood track, that just has a lot more give than a steel structure. It's not necessarily unsafe, it just causes a lot of downtime, which is more of an inconvenience to the guests and the park. The trains were also super heavy too, since they needed the magnets on the bottom of the train to launch. The launch was then replaced with a high-speed lift hill, and several portions of the track have been replaced with steel track for better structural stability, since there was a lot of premature wear found on the ride. I haven't ridden this thing since 2019 when it was fully wood and still had the launch, but I've heard it's nowhere near as good as it used to be, which is truly a shame. Okay, so getting into the actual list of defunct rides now, this will only be counting major thrill coasters or family coasters. Basically, no small scale or kiddie coasters, because this list would probably have a lot of them, especially with all the defunct kiddie coasters from FECs or carnivals. Number 20, Superflight at Rye Playland in Rye, New York. Operated from 2004 to 2022. Well, possibly. So this ride was set for removal after the 2022 season, and if so, good riddance, this ride absolutely sucked. However, apparently there are rumors of the park reopening this for the 2025 season after it's been sitting SBNO, or standing but not operating, for 2 years. I don't know where this came from. I remember a few people who have been to the park this year saw a banner outside the ride saying it's opening next season. However, I haven't seen this online anywhere, and I really hope they tear this thing down and get a much better roller coaster in its spot, even if it's something small, because this park deserves one. Number 19, Funtown Family Coaster at Funtown Pier in Seaside Park, New Jersey. Operated from 2004 to 2012. I know, I said no kiddie coasters on this list, but look, it's literally called Funtown Family Coaster. And also, the model is literally called Family Coaster from the manufacturer. So, yeah. Also, it's my video, I can do what I want. I have a soft spot for this coaster, as I rode it a lot as a kid. Even though it was a janky E&F Miler kiddie coaster, or family coaster, sorry, it was kind of fun. It was fairly forceless, but it featured some okay laterals at moments, and I remember it had a pretty good stomach-dropping feeling if you were in the back row on the first drop. This ride was somehow not affected during Superstorm Sandy back in 2012, so it was put into storage on the pier. Unfortunately, it was damaged beyond repair when that section of the boardwalk caught on fire, and it destroyed what was barely left of the pier. Number 18 and 17, the Primeval World Coasters at Animal Kingdom in Orlando, Florida. Operated from 2002 to 2020. These were two Reverchon spinning Wild Mouse coasters paired up side by side so that the park could have something of higher capacity. This was always such a strange ride for a Disney park. It had this weird dinosaur theming, and it would have been pretty good for another park standards, but definitely not Disney. From what I remember, these rides were not the greatest. Yeah, definitely not. It was trimmed to death, rode not so great, and it also barely spun, so yeah, pretty bottom of the barrel. Number 16, T3 at Kentucky Kingdom in Louisville, Kentucky. Operated from 1995 to 2022. This was one of the prototype Become SLCs, and it was pretty awful. However, surprisingly, not the worst SLC I've ridden. Maybe it was because I was prepared for the awful transitions and flag-crushing lap bars, but my sole ride on this thing wasn't terrible. SLCs do have a good layout, so I remember I tried enjoying the forces of the ride while also bracing for the transitions and making sure I was holding up my lap bar from coming down further due to the crushing positive Jesus thing pulled. This had a weird case of all the transitions being terrible, but the rest of the track being fairly smooth. The double roll was strangely the best part of the ride, providing a fairly smooth, intense set of inversions, but either way, it was still really bad. Thank God this didn't have the original SLC trains with the hard over the shoulders and had those strange Kumbach trains with the, well, arguably just as bad lap bars, but hey, at least there was no headbanging. Number 15, Mighty Mouse at Funtown Pier in Seaside Park, New Jersey. Operated from 2005 to 2012. This Myler manufacturing Wild Mouse is much older than 2005 though. According to RCDB, this was actually down the shore at Playland's Castaway Cove from 1996 to 2004. However, before that, it traveled with Royal American Shows, then was put into storage in 1959. Into storage in 1959, so that means it even operated before that. So yeah, this thing was pretty damn old. Playland bought it in 1995, then it lived on the Jersey Shore until 2012 when Superstorm Sandy unfortunately destroyed it along with the rest of the pier. It was a fairly unique coaster with a bobsled style car and then just a thin little strap as a restraint. This thing was as jank as it can get. Also, looking at the other existing Myler Wild Mouse, this looks to have received a new smoother turn over the station, and it definitely isn't from the 1950s. Number 14, Flitzer at Morey's Piers in Wildwood, New Jersey. Operated from 1983 to 2018. Flitzer allegedly was manufactured in 1969 according to RCDB. Where was it for the rest of the time? Who knows. But apparently the park only purchased it for $150 grand, which is about $500 grand today. That's pretty cheap for a roller coaster. This was a fun little family coaster from Zaire, swooping drops and turns, and was essentially one giant helix with two other higher speed helixes at the end. The ride also had bobsled style cars and minimalistic restraints, but it really wasn't anything crazy. Just a smooth family coaster. The ride was removed to make way for Runaway Tram, which is an excellent family coaster, so I'm definitely not complaining. Number 13 and 12, the Rolling Thunder coasters at Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey. Operated from 1979 to 2013. Wow, isn't this footage just absolutely incredible? I was definitely like 11 or 12 years old when I took this. I was lucky enough to grab quite a few rides on both sides of this when I was younger, and it was also after I became a coaster enthusiast too. The right side was definitely rougher, since it was the side that usually ran when it was only running one of the trains, or I should say one of the sides actually, but the left side was decently smooth. It wasn't really forceful, it had a few decent moments of laterals, but no airtime whatsoever. When this ride was racing, it was so much fun, which is why this is so high on the list. Unfortunately, it was removed to make way for Zumanjaro's Q, but now even that's not around anymore. It's really a shame this ride couldn't be saved. There were rumors about it getting RMC'd back in like late 2012, early 2013, and there were actually RMC employees on site inspecting the ride back in early 2013. I actually saw this myself. It really sucks this couldn't get RMC'd, and I actually really miss this ride a lot. Even if RMC didn't come in and redo it, Gravity Group or GCI or somebody like that could have came in and refurbished it and maybe even gave it new trains, and it would probably still be around today. Ever since this was removed, Great Adventure still has that gap where there's not a larger coaster that little kids can ride. Like, yeah, sure, we have Mine Train, Skull Mountain, and Dark Knight, but this was a lot bigger than those, and it was still not intense enough for kids to really be scared away. It was definitely rough enough, but definitely not intense enough. Number 11, Stinger at Dorney Park in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Operated from 2012 to 2017. The ride started its life at California's Great America in 1998 as Invertigo, and it was the first of Vecoma's Invertigo model. However, the ride was sent over to Dorney Park in the 2011 off-season, since for whatever reason, their maintenance team can handle what are usually pretty unreliable rides for other parks. I mean, look, they still have their Enterprise, and they have Demon Drop. That park truly cares about old or unique rides, and it's super cool. Stinger was a fairly forceful, intense, and from what I remember, wasn't really a rough ride. It was really cool to be able to take the boomerang layout on the inverted model, and also you can sit either forwards or backwards. Unfortunately, it was really unreliable, as with the rest of the Invertigo models, so it was only removed after 5 years operation, and all of the parts and whatever else went over to Kings Island for their Invertigo model. Number 10. Starjet at Casino Pier in Seaside Heights, New Jersey, operated from 2002 to 2012. It may be the nostalgia talking, but I remember this E&F Miler family coaster being genuinely good. There was a clone of it down at Fun Spot Kissimmee called Hurricane, and that one is honestly better since it runs a lot faster, but my fairly recent ride on that just confirms the layout is good on this one. Starjet started out with a scenic turn right over the water, and then 2 large airtime filled drops, along with a sharp turn filled with laterals. Granted, the train tracked pretty poorly around these turns, but regardless they had good laterals. I mean, just look at my amazing camera work here. The rest of the ride was filled with smaller drops that provided good airtime, along with one really good hill with strong floater airtime. The rest of the turns also provided decent laterals, but unfortunately this ride was swept away into the ocean when Superstorm Sandy hit the Jersey Shore in October of 2012. The pier did rebuild and came back stronger than ever, with brand new rides, along with a new section of pier with the unofficial replacement to Starjet, which is Hydrus, the Gerstlauer Eurofighter 320 model. It's a pretty good ride and definitely better than Starjet. I just wish, they could both exist in the same world. Number 9. Anaconda at King's Dominion in Doswell, Virginia, operated from 1991 to 2024. I actually really enjoyed this ride whenever I rode it. It was fairly forceful, and I had great hang time. Yeah, the middle part wasn't anything great, but it really wasn't as rough as everyone says it is. Unfortunately, this ride was just removed unannounced as part of the 2024 Coaster Apocalypse, or, whatever you want to call it. Not many people really cared for it, so I totally understand, but still. It's been rumored to have been removed for a while since it wasn't a popular ride, and Aerodynamics, the manufacturer of the ride, doesn't exist anymore, so I could imagine it's pretty hard to get parts, even though apparently Premier and S&S manufacture parts for it, along with Vekoma too apparently. King's Dominion seems to be on a modernization project right now, so it only made sense that this was removed. Number 8. Scorpion at Busch Gardens Tampa in Tampa, Florida, operated from 1980 to 2024. This was a fairly solid Schwarzkopf looping coaster, featuring a super forceful vertical loop and some decent laterals, and overall a pretty smooth ride for its age. This was announced to be removed in late 2024, presumably for its old age and the fact that Schwarzkopf, the manufacturer of the ride, doesn't exist anymore, and more than likely for some sort of future expansion. It is kind of a shame though, because this was the park's oldest coaster, and it was a classic too, and of course one of the few remaining Schwarzkopf looping coasters left in the US. Number 7. Alpine Bobsled at Six Flags Great Escape in Queensbury, New York, operated from 1998 to 2023. This ride originally began its life at Six Flags Great Adventure as Sarajevo Bobsled in 1984, themed after the 1983 Winter Olympics. The ride then entered the Six Flags Ride Rotation program, and it was removed to make way for Great American Scream Machine. The ride then moved to Six Flags Great America in 1989, and then went to the last Great Six Flags Park, Great Escape, in 1998, and then lived the rest of its life there. I first rode this back in 2014, and I loved it. It was very intense, but very janky. It was indeed pretty damn rough, but regardless of that, it was a super unique but awfully unreliable ride. In 2023, it was removed due to it basically just being a piece of shit, old, and hard to maintain. This ride also could never run basically when it rained, and then even for a decent amount of time after it rained, as if any water was in the trough, the ride had issues running and just couldn't run. However, before it closed in 2023, the ride actually sat SB&O for a decent chunk of the 2023 season. I actually missed it when I visited the park that year. But the park got open for its last few months and announced its closure with a month left of its life, and then announced it was making way for Bobcat, the new for 2024 gravity group wooden coaster. It seems that people generally agree that the Bobcat is better, but I will always miss this ride, and it was definitely been always one of my favorites. Number 6. Goliath at Six Flags New England in Agawam, Massachusetts, operated from 2012 to 2019. A lot of people hated this Vekoma Giant inverted boomerang, but based off of my one ride on it, I actually really liked this thing, and it was a pretty common opinion among my friend group at the time. I got the front row, which was apparently the only half decent row. It was super forceful, and the pacing was really crazy. This thing was insanely unreliable though, and of course, disliked since it had those weird premiere trains that just made the ride rough and uncomfortable. It was scrapped a few years after it closed in 2019, and it was also unannounced too, but not many people cared. It is now being replaced with an intimate straddle coaster called Quantum Accelerator, which to be honest looks really good, and it's exactly what the park needed. So I wouldn't really call this a loss. It's just a shame that it couldn't be saved and, actually had good trains on it so it ran normally. Number 5. Wildcat at Hershey Park in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Operated from 1996 to 2022. This was GCI's first ever coaster, and it seemed to be not very liked. However, I actually really enjoyed this ride. Wildcat had some pretty good airtime moments along with some laterals, and parts of decent pacing too. Everyone seemed to not like this since it was quote-unquote boring and quote-unquote rough, but to be honest, it really wasn't that bad at all. It wasn't smooth by any means, but it really wasn't uncomfortable either. The slight roughness also added to the airtime somehow. Maybe it was just some of the janky transitions the ride had, but still. Also, can't forget about the brakes. Do I miss it? Yeah, a little bit, but I don't really care anymore because it ended up getting RMC'd into Wildcat's Revenge. Arguably one of the best coasters in the world. I mean, hey, it's in my top 3. Number 4. Wicked Twister at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. Operated from 2002 to 2021. This intimate impulse coaster was awesome. It was truly a shame it wasn't moved to another park or just kept around for a little longer, because this ride was great. The swing launches back and forth were definitely fun, and the pull-ups into the spikes pulled some really good positive G-forces, but easily the best part of the ride was pulling up into the max swing on the back spike, especially or even the back row. Flying over 200 feet in the air, twisting, going backwards, and facing the ground was easily one of my favorite moments of any coaster. And I'm glad Cedar Point sort of quote-unquote honored Wicked Twister with Top Thrill 2, and the giant spike on that thing. However, Wicked Twister was an older, less popular ride that was hard to get parts for since Intamin apparently doesn't make the parts for the impulse coasters anymore, and it was replaced with the Wild Mouse and the Pavilion. So, I'd say it's a decent replacement. I mean, a cool restaurant type thing, and then another coaster? Yeah, definitely not bad. Oh, and the whole area got revitalized too, so I guess you really can't complain. Just a shame it didn't get relocated. Number 3. Green Lantern at Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey. Operated from 2011 to 2024. Easily one of the most overhated coasters of all time in my opinion. It had an incredible layout with incredible forces, great pacing, and even some airtime moments sprinkled in. It wasn't the smoothest ride, and people found it to be pretty uncomfortable, but since I've worked the ride for the past 5 years, I've learned how to ride it correctly, and I really loved the ride, but unfortunately it was disliked by a lot of people. It also didn't help that this ride was originally built in 1997 over at Kentucky Kingdom, and then eventually was relocated over to Six Flags Great Adventure after they removed Great American Scream Machine in 2010. The ride was ultimately removed in 2024, and as of the making of this video, it is still currently being demolished. It's truly a shame the ride couldn't be sent off somewhere that could have used it, and it would have needed some work, but it's still a solid ride and had some life left in it. Number 2. Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. Operated from 2003 to 2021. I was insanely lucky to get on this thing. In 2019, when I went to the park for the first time, closed. In fact, it was the whole month that it was closed pretty much. The second time I went in 2021, I got a singular ride on my first day there. The second day, closed the entire day. A week later, the accident unfortunately happened and then it closed forever. If you guys don't know what happened, I highly suggest you look it up, but I'm not going to explain here. It really was a great ride though. The launch was awesome, the trains felt super open, and the airtime over the top hat was incredible. But ultimately, it was a super short ride, and Top Thrill 2 is said to be a much better ride. And besides the issues it had this year, apparently way more reliable in terms of the ride system. However, not many people have experienced it yet since the ride was closed for most of the 2024 season, but the park has promised it'll be open for 2025, but unfortunately coaster prototypes are a little unpredictable, so who knows. Hopefully it will though, so we can all get to experience Top Thrill Dragster or Top Thrill 2, whatever you guys want to call it now. And coming in at number 1 is Kingda Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey, operated from 2005 to 2024. Yes, I actually like this ride way more than Dragster. Yes, the trains weren't as comfy and it was a little shakier than Dragster, but the launch was more punchy, The positive forces going up and down the top hat were a little more intense, and I've always really liked the airtime hill at the end of the ride. It usually didn't fly as fast over the top hat as Dragster, but when it did, man, this ride was incredible. The past 2 years, this ride was running pretty consistently good, and for whatever reason, the back of the train was much smoother than usual. And because of that, I found the back row was actually really good, and I wouldn't avoid it all the time. I would actually give it a pretty decent amount of rides. But it is definitely not as good as the front row. Unfortunately, the ride was closed in late 2024 to make way for a multi-record breaking launch coaster in 2026 that has yet to been announced yet. It's set for removal in early 2025, and yeah, the ride was decently unreliable, but it was loved by many, and so it's truly a shame it couldn't have been saved or refurbished like Top Thrill 2. The world's tallest and fastest coaster will definitely be missed. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe for more stuff just like this. If you've ridden any defunct coasters, tell me your favorites. Once again, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.